It is great to be with you guys this morning. Hey, my name is Justin Brown. I'm one of the youth pastors here. And before we really jump in this morning, we really start looking at the third week in this series of Stand Your Ground, I just want to say how excited I am to be able to be here and to speak with you this morning. And I was explaining this to the 9 a.m. service that, normally at 9 a.m. I'm upstairs and I'm with the teenagers, the middle school, the high school, and I'm speaking to them. I'm sitting down in a group with them and we're having conversations, and I wanted to make it very clear to the 9 a.m. service that my excitement was not that I was getting away from the teenagers for a morning and instead getting to come talk to all of you. My excitement comes because by coming down here, I get to speak into the lives of the parents and the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles and the teachers and the coaches that are investing in the lives of the very same students that I love and I care about so deeply, that I want to see be strong followers of Christ. And by getting to come down here, I get to let you in on like a little glimpse of the person who is speaking into the lives of your students on Wednesdays and Sundays and throughout the week. But I also get a chance to speak into your lives. And this is something that I think if we don't stop and we don't think about the fact that our faith and our relationship with God is directly affecting the generations underneath us, then we're going to lose the generation underneath us. And as we've been in a series on Stand Your Ground and looking at the armor of God and talking about this spiritual battle that is going on, that, the spiritual battle that Mike has defined for us as any attack of Satan, any scheme of Satan that disrupts, that discourages our walk with God. If we don't stop and recognize that that battle is going on in our lives, and that battle is going on in the generations below us, in Gen Z in particular, who I work with, then eventually Gen Z won't care at all about this battle, and that will fall on us. That will fall on us as the adults in their lives. And so we have to recognize that as part of this battle. And just a quick infomercial, I want to encourage you guys, actually, Harold, I don't think he's in here right now, but Pastor Harold actually found me after the 9 a.m. service, and he said, Justin, I need to strangle you right now. And I was like, wow, I said a lot of things up there. Which thing was it that really upset you? But I had encouraged people at the end of the 9 a.m. service to go out and to buy a book in our resource area of family ministries. And he said, Justin, next time you're going to promo a book, let me know. Because we sold out in like 3 minutes. And now I'm taking all these orders and I'm having to tell people we don't have any more. But I would encourage you to go to Harold afterwards and say, Harold, I need you to order me a book. And this book goes by the name of So the Next Generation Will Know. I don't know how many of you are like me and you realize that generations have very different habits and have very different thoughts. And they're just not the same. The baby boomers are not the same as the busters, who are not the same as the millennials, which I am a part of, and who are not the same as Generation Z. But if you would like, and I would strongly encourage you to do this, if you would like to understand just a little bit more about why Gen Z is the way that they are, and how because of that you can relate to them. Like, I hear complaints a lot that they're always on their phones. They're always on their phones. Who gave them their phones? They're always on their phones. Well, yeah, that's the only world they've ever known, is a world. They don't know the bag phone. And they don't know the phone that plugs into the wall that you have to leave at home. This is the only world they know. They don't know a world without screens. So how do we relate to a generation that doesn't know a world without Apple and Samsung and Android and all of them battling against each other? That's one of the areas that J. Warner Wallace, who was here about 2 years ago right after Easter, and Sean McDowell have tackled in this book. And I'll put it this way. We've given it to all of our leaders in the youth group and asked them to read this because we found it to be that incredible of a resource. And it is written for people who work with young people, meaning it is written for people who don't like to read. So that means it's easy to read, and it can help you understand just a little bit more about Gen Z. And I cannot encourage you strongly enough. We believe so strongly in it that we contacted Sean McDowell himself and asked for a discount on the book. I actually have to ask Lynette if he actually gave us that discount or if we just asked him for that discount. But we at least asked, and we want to get this into your hands. Because the truth of the matter is we are in this battle all around us. We need to be prepared for the battle that we're in. So we have been in this series for the last 2 weeks called Stand Your Ground, where we've been looking at a passage out of Ephesians chapter 6, and we're going to look at that in just a moment. If you want to pull your Bibles out and start turning to that now. We have been looking at a passage in Ephesians chapter 6 in which the Apostle Paul is writing to the church in Ephesus about the armor that we have provided for us, the armor that we have been equipped with to go into this battle. So it's not Jesus or Paul or whoever saying, hey, there's a battle going on, good luck. But instead, he said, there's a battle going on, and here's the stuff that you need in order to fight that battle. And again, I work with teens, and so I know that when we think spiritual warfare, like one of the first things we think of is there was a show called Supernatural that I think is finally coming to an end. But there was a show called Supernatural in which they're fighting demons, and they get rid of demons by throwing water on them, and they get rid of demons by doing chants and all these kinds of things. And so that's kind of what we've started to think of as spiritual warfare, is like anybody can go into this battle. You don't actually have to have the armor that God has given you. Anybody can go into this. Or a spiritual battle is, that's that stuff that we see in the Hollywood movies where it's, the things that go bump in the night, and it's the movies where you get dragged out from underneath your sheets and all that, the stuff we don't let our kids watch. But the truth of the matter is, there is a real spiritual battle going on. If you are a follower of Christ, then that means that you are professing that you believe the words that he has left behind for us, and in those words, he tells us very plainly that this battle is very real. And in Ephesians chapter 6, starting in verse 10, Paul writes these words, "Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God." Now, just real quick, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, but just real quick, if he says put on the full armor, that means we could try to just use a few pieces of it, right? And we would fail. No, he says put on the full armor, not just the belt we talked about last week, not just the 2 pieces that we're going to talk about tonight. Put on the full armor of God, or prepare to go down in the battle. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And he says it again, therefore put on the what? The full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. Stand firm then with the belt of truth that we talked about last week, buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place that we're going to talk about next week. We're going to go out of order, and I'm going to explain why here in just a second. And with your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all the saints. Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand your ground. Today, like I mentioned, we're going to talk about 2 pieces. We're going to skip the breastplate, and we're going to go on to what in some translations they would say are the shoes or the sandals. In this translation, in the NIV, it said that your feet fitted for the readiness. But your feet are fitted with things called shoes, right? And so part of the reason why I wanted to talk about shoes, and I thought Pastor Mike asked me to talk about shoes, and whether he actually asked me to or whether or not I just heard shoes because I like shoes, is that I have heard, that I have a reputation in this church. That there are those in this church who, they don't necessarily know what my role is. They don't necessarily know what my name is. But they know that I typically come out here and I wear a pair of red Nikes. And so to these people, I have been informed I am known as Pastor Red Shoes. That they have actually sat with their family and go, that pastor that Pastor Red shoes. And here's the thing I want to tell you. I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly fine with you knowing me. Now, these are not my Nikes. I switched it up on you, and I put on some Fila's instead. So I'm mixing things up. But here's the truth about it. It says in the NIV to have your feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. What we put on our feet matters. This morning, when I went out to shovel the driveway, I didn't put on flip-flops because that would have been insane. And when I say that's insane, I recognize that some of you might have done that this morning, and I say you are insane. But we don't go out and shovel snow, typically, with flip-flops on our feet. Although we do live in Wyoming, and I understand that we do some weird things, and other people would look at what we wear and think that we're nuts anyway. But when I went out this morning, I put on, I don't know if these all got put in this bag after the first service or not, but when I went out this morning, I put on a boot to go out and shovel the snow in my pajama pants that were not thick enough to shovel snow. But I put on this boot because it keeps the water out, and it gives me traction when I'm walking across a slick surface. And so I put on a boot when I went out to shovel snow. When I go out to run, I don't wear this boot because that would be miserable. So when I go out to run, I put on a running shoe. And yes, this is a British running shoe because when I buy running shoes, I make sure that I buy good running shoes, not cheap running shoes, because I used to get shin splints really bad and I didn't like those. And these were cheap on Amazon, but they were still a really good running shoe. So I put on my brightly colored running shoes so that I can run at night and everybody sees me. I understand the irony that the first time I wore this pair of running shoes was for a 4th of July 5K. If you forgot history class, we declared independence from the British. It was not the right choice of shoe for a 4th of July 5K. So I tried to remedy it years later and decided to buy myself an Old Glory shoe to go with it. And these will be my next running shoes after I put 500 miles on my previous running shoes, because I need my shoes in good condition in order to be ready to go out and run a lot of miles on them. But when I go out to play soccer, and I had the opportunity to play soccer when I was in college for the college team, not because I was good, but because I did cross country, and they just needed somebody who could run up and down the field all day. It was a bunch of ministry students who were, we were nice guys, but we were not good at soccer. So I was able to make the team, and we went out there, but I didn't wear any of those. This is actually my wife's. This was not my shoe. But I would wear a cleat when I went out there to play soccer, because I needed to be able to dig in and turn and run fast and plant fast. We don't watch a lot of soccer here in America, and I get that. We watch the real football here in America. And so here in America, I hope we don't have any British people here today. But if you watch it, you see that they wear what on their feet? Cleats. So that they can dig in, and they can be ready to push back. When you're an offensive lineman and the defense is coming at you and they're trying to get to your quarterback, you don't want to be wearing the wrong kind of shoe. You don't want to be wearing an indoor shoe. You want to be wearing an outdoor cleat so that you can dig it in and you can push back. If you don't think what's on your feet matters, about 3 weeks ago, we play this game in our house called Daddy's Always It. It actually doesn't have that name. I just made up that name right now because it didn't have a name. But we play this, it's supposed to be tag, but for some reason, I'm the only one who's ever it in this game of tag. And so I chase our girls, and in our main floor of our house, we have laminate floors. And they are super slick laminate floors. And this one day, 3 weeks ago, I'm running through. I've got a daughter who is 6 years old. Sans, I don't know, about that tall. Have no idea how much she weighs. Her name is Tegan. She is a firecracker. She is aggressive. She is not scared of anything. And this little 6-year-old girl, I'm 36, and I'm full grown. Yes, still small, but I am full grown. And this little 6-year-old girl laid me out when I was running through, because I was running through on our laminate floors in a pair of socks. And so when she came and hit me here, my feet were flying out here, and it took everything within me and my daddy superpowers to not land on her to the point that I would only have 2 children left. I had to do everything to save my daughter in that moment. But this little 6-year-old weighs next to nothing girl took me out because I had improper footwear on. Now, for the last 3 weeks, she's tried that again, and I've had shoes on, and she goes, boop, and she goes flying up, and I go, yeah, that's right. Because I know that for the rest of her life, she's going to be talking trash about that moment. Because that is Tegan. And if you knew Tegan, you would understand that is exactly what she will be doing with that. But we are told to have our feet fitted with readiness. Meaning not passivity, with vigilance. To be ready means that we are vigilant. To be ready means to understand that there is a battle going on. If a soldier were to put on the wrong footwear or to go out there with no footwear and they went down, they fell on their back, they got pushed backwards because they didn't have the proper footwear on, there was very little chance of them walking away from that battle. They had to be ready to plant in and to stand against the enemy that was coming at them. But it's not just standing against it with anything, with any kind of shoe. I mean, you could say, well, you can put on any shoe and stand better than with your bare foot. I mean, that's mostly true, not completely true. That's mostly true. But it says our shoes are the gospel of peace. Imagine being able to receive news as a 27-year-old young man that you have a brain tumor and you have a 0% chance of living. And being able to receive that news with peace in your heart. And being able to go out and to share about Jesus with everybody that you come across because you realize, I'm running out of time, and so I'm going to do this. And I am so full of peace in this moment. I'm not happy about it, but I have peace in this moment. I've seen that happen. And I've seen that young man's wife, when the tumor finally took him, have peace in that moment. I'm not saying she didn't cry. I'm not saying she wasn't sad. I'm not saying she wasn't confused. But she had peace in the midst of it. Or when you're the 55-year-old man who seems perfectly healthy, and you go in for an exam, and you come out finding out that you have colon cancer and 6 months left to live. And you're at peace. Because you have put your peace not in the things of this world, but you have put your peace in the gospel of Jesus. In John, I've seen that happen. In John 14:27, Jesus looks at his disciples and he says, "Peace I leave with you, peace I give you. But not peace as this world gives." See, when he would have been saying these words, the Romans would have been occupying the area, and the Romans had this thing called Pax Romana, that they would come in and they would conquer a land, and they would put you under their rule and then say, "You have peace because we just dominated you." That's the peace that the world had to offer at the time. That's what the readers would have read in Ephesians. That's what the readers or the listeners would have heard when Jesus declared those words. That your peace is when you're conquered by the world, or our peace is that when something sad happens, I'll just distract myself with something else. Or I'll find peace in the universe. All of these different places that we can look to for peace. We can look for peace in our family. Jesus says, I don't come to give you that kind of peace. I come to give you the kind of peace that comes without fear, so that you will not be troubled or afraid. Not so that your life will be easy. Remember, Jesus wept when his friend Lazarus died, and he saw the pain on Mary and Martha's faces. Jesus wept, but that doesn't mean that his heart was just, feuding with itself. He was still at peace, but you can have sadness in that. And that's what we're ready with when the world throws things our way. So that's kind of a defensive posture with these shoes. There's also the offensive posture with these shoes. With what our feet are ready with. You hear us talk a lot about in here having Jesus conversations. We live in a world that has very little peace. I mean, just think about what you see when you turn on the news. Just the other week, One of our schools or a couple of our schools were under lockdown because there was a possibility of something bad happening there. That doesn't happen in a world that's at peace with itself. But imagine if in the middle of that, you could actually fully believe those words that we sang earlier, that yes, I will. In the midst of, and I'm going to get all the words wrong. I apologize for that. But yes, I will. In the midst of the troubles that come my way, I can have joy. I think I got those reversed. I could have James stand up and just sing them for us, but then he would look at me and say no. To be able to say those words because I'm not waiting on the attack to come. I already know the attack is going to come, and so I'm preparing ahead of time for that attack with peace. And then the next piece of armor that you see when you're looking through there is that we are given a shield of faith. We're not given this shield of, well, I believe that Jesus exists because, I don't know, I just don't have any better options, so I'm just going to choose to believe that until something better. That's not faith. Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is the evidence of things unseen. We can base our faith in something real. A soldier would not have gone out with a shield that he wasn't confident in. A shield that he knew was there. A shield that he had evidence in. And I love our Roman guy over here, but it wouldn't have been that type of a shield either. Most of the time. I mean, sometimes yes. It would have been more like what this dude over here is holding. If you look into the Roman shield, this would have been like they're carrying around a door. Would have weighed about 30 pounds. So there's strength involved in this whole thing, but they're carrying around like a shield. So that when the arrows are coming their way, the arrows from the trees, because I don't know if you've watched war movies or anything like that, but you don't typically use an arrow by getting 2 feet away from somebody and pulling it back and shooting an arrow. The arrows come from the trees, and so you can't have a little shield that you're not confident in, getting ready to block down these arrows. You've got this massive thing that you are behind, and it's not going to get to you. That's the kind of shield that he's saying we have, because that's the people he would have been writing to. That's what they would have understood when they heard shield. They wouldn't have thought Captain America, because let's be real, most of us do not have Captain America's reflexes to block off all the attacks that are coming our way. He gave us a mighty shield to stand behind, a shield of faith that we can be confident in. And that's all, I get it, that is all good and well that we have these shoes of the gospel of peace and we've got this shield of faith that we can stand behind, but how do we use these things? My biggest thing when I'm speaking to students, when I'm speaking to anybody is, I want to get to the so what. So what? How do I use this stuff? We were talking during some run-through stuff on Thursday about some of the biggest attacks that Satan throws our way. You know, I was thinking, what's the opposite of faith? It's doubt. He throws or he shoots from the trees when we least expect it, these arrows of doubt at us. Are we hiding behind a shield, or is it going to hit a vital organ when it comes in and we're not ready for that? But I think I agree with the discussion that we were having that maybe two of the bigger attacks that Satan is using, we're not even paying attention, and that's kind of the point behind it. You know, if you read through Scripture, we read that Satan, he crouches like a lion getting ready to pounce, and a lion doesn't get like here to its prey. A lion hides in the grass, and it waits until the prey isn't paying attention, and then pounces on the prey. And that's what Satan does. He waits until we're not paying attention. And I think he's starting to do, or he's been doing a really good job of getting us not to pay attention by using these two things called complacency and apathy. You know, if you choose to buy this book and you choose to read through this book, they're going to mention that, you know, we've always talked about, we've talked about for a long time about how atheism is like one of the biggest counters to faith. That atheism is one of the biggest challenges to faith, and the new atheists these days, I mean, they've got some great arguments. But they make the argument in here that with Gen Z at least, with this generation coming up, the biggest challenge is not atheism, The biggest challenge is apatheism. I mean, it's got a name now because it's that big of a deal. It's not that people are sitting here going, I believe, I have faith, this is awesome, or they're over here on the other side going, I don't believe any of this stuff, it's a bunch of hogwash. Is that they're standing in the middle and they're going, I just don't care. If he's real, great. If he's not real, just as great. I don't care. And that's kind of sunk into the church a little bit. I mean, I want you to ask yourself some questions. And some of you guys, you're going to answer these questions, and you're going to be like, oh, no, that was an easy quiz. That's great. I'm good. Some of you, you're going to be challenged by it, and you're going to think about it. And some of you are going to be like, how dare he ask that question? And I'm going to ask him anyway. What about those times where we wake up on Sunday morning, and we're just like, you know what? I'm just tired today. So I don't think I'm going to go to church today. It's not that big of a deal. Complacency, apathy. Or what about those times where you're like, you know, I'm not really sure about, this one area that we talk about with God. And instead of really jumping into it and trying to find answers to it, you just kind of sit there and go, well, that's fine. I don't really need to know the answers. It's okay. Things will work out as they work out. Or, James was talking earlier about those times where you sit there and you're like, I don't really like this song. So I'm just not going to sing. I'm not going to worship God during this song because I don't like it. Forgetting that it has nothing to do with whether or not you like the song. It has to do with who you're worshiping. Complacency. Apathy. I didn't like what that youth pastor got up there and said, so I'm definitely not tithing this month. Complacency. Apathy. Well, getting to service on time isn't really that important. I mean, I can skip the first 3 songs and then just get there later, or I'll hang out in the atrium until they get to the announcements because I don't really need the worship with other people. Complacency. Apathy. I don't need to dig into the word myself. I don't need to have conversations with other people. I don't need to have these conversations with my kids. Complacency. Apathy. It doesn't matter. My kids will figure it out by themselves. They need to find their own answers anyway. Here's what's been really laying heavy on my heart lately, is that I'll come in from the back sometimes, or I'll come out here and I'll do announcements, or I'll stand out here somewhere and I look around and I see a lot of empty seats. And there's 2 different ways that we can be complacent and apathetic about that. One, we can look at that and we can say, well, if they don't want to come, they don't want to come. When in reality, we haven't talked to them about coming. And they don't know what goes on here. And each one of those empty seats is a person who could be hearing about the gospel of peace that they desperately need in their lives. That's one way we can be apathetic about that. But here's the part that's really been hitting me hard lately. When I go and I eat dinner with my family, and I go home with my family, or the other week when we went and did community group on location at Qdoba, we didn't leave a table in between us. We didn't leave seats in between us. But when we come to church, we call ourselves the family, and then we say, but I don't want to sit by my family. When we have that time in the service where it's now stand up and greet one another like, hey, I'm an introvert. Believe it or not, and most people say, you're a total liar. No, I am. I love being by myself. So when we do that greeting time, I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. But I shouldn't have to walk 5 rows before I get to somebody else in my family. Because if I'm sitting at home at the table, there's not an empty seat in between me and I understand that that's not how all families are. So that's why I use the community group answer. When we go out and eat with our community group, I don't leave a table between Sarah and I and the next couple in our community group. we sit together, and we experience life together. For my whole life, I've heard the phrase about, this is a time between you and God, and that's true, but this is a time between you and God with other people. Otherwise, you could just do this at home. This is about being with other people. In community groups, that's why we talk so much about them. It's because when you are going into a spiritual battle, you need your comrades next to you. With those shields that we were talking about, they would actually have a position called the testudo, or the tortoise formation, where they would take their shields, and I would take my shield and plant it in the ground. And then the person next to me would plant their shield in the ground, and the person next to him would plant his shield in the ground, and it would go on that way for a while, and then the person behind me would lift his shield up, set it on my shield, and hold it above his head, and the person behind him would do the same until they got to something that looks kind of like this. It's really hard to get an arrow into that. And sometimes our shields are cracked. And sometimes our shields are damaged. And we have to have people fighting alongside us to protect us with their shield for a moment as we fix our shield. And that doesn't work if this is just my time with God. This is our time with God. So I don't know, I may come in here next week and you guys might sit even farther apart from each other because you're like, take that, youth pastor. But when we go upstairs, we actually got rid of the chairs and we got rid of rows and we just let them sit out there in a blob because then they're actually next to each other. Because we need each other if we are going to be ready. If we are going to have the gospel of peace that's ready to protect us but ready to protect each other, then we've got to be with each other. And if our shield of faith is going to protect us, then we need it to be ready to help somebody else out, and they're going to be ready to help us out. And that is how we go into spiritual warfare that is very real. That is how we fight back against complacency and apathy because, and I've been called out on this more than once by some close friends like, Justin, I don't think you seem to care about this. Justin, what do you think about this? And it's something I hadn't been thinking about. I'm like, I don't want to hear that, but I need to hear that because they're helping fight off those arrows that are coming at me that I'm not paying attention to. And they're helping keep me ready in church. That's what we have to do as we go into this spiritual battle. We have to put on the full armor ourselves so that we can fight for ourselves, so that we can fight for others, so that Generation Z and Generation Alpha that's going to come after them, that they will know the word and they will know the gospel, and so that they can continue to fight the battle. And if we decide that we don't care, then we will not be able to stand our ground, and neither will they. Would you pray with me this morning? God, thank you so much for being real with us and for letting us know this is not easy, but that there is an enemy who wants to take us down, and reminding us repeatedly that we must be alert. Lord, your disciple Peter wrote to us that we need to be prepared at all times to give reason for the hope that we have. And God, we can't do that if we're apathetic and we're complacent and we're letting those arrows come at us. So thank you for equipping us with what we need. God, we pray this and we thank you for this in your name. Amen.